So I'm here at Super Return US East with Chris Jones, co-founder and managing partner of Blue Highway Capital. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Phil.
So we're going to talk about opportunities for investing away from the big coastal cities. So just looking at your website for Blue Highway Capital, it says that your focus is connecting rural America with growth capital. Why that focus, and where did you see the greatest need when you founded the firm in 2015, and has that changed today?
So the reason we are investing in it is because there's a very large structural break in the marketplace. There's very little private equity or debt, for that matter, getting to communities and companies in these underserved rural marketplaces. So when we formed it, it was before the election of 2016. We really didn't have had no idea of the magnitude of the problem and the angst that was in these communities and the frustration that was there because they could not get capital and thrive and flourish the way that they should be able to. Clearly there's talent in these communities and there are ideas there, but the reason for it and the rationale for it has held. Just statistics, about somewhere between 75 and 80% of most private equity goes to California, New York, and Massachusetts. So if you think about the other 20% covering the 47 other states, and we're I know New York and or New York City and Boston are in our footprint, but when we're Maine to Maryland and Virginia and Ohio, I mean, we've got a lot of ground to cover, and that's on the private equity side. On the debt side, you would think community banks would be the supplier of capital to these businesses, but in fact, the Federal Reserve points out in their study from 2018 that just 16% of all of the loan portfolios from the community banks go to companies. The rest go to residential mortgages and commercial real estate development projects. So companies are getting neither debt nor equity, and that was the premise of the fund, and we're pleased that we can address that.
Okay. And I understand a particular focus of Blue Highway is rural and underserved areas of the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic. What are you seeing in these regions in terms of the types of businesses that are in need of capital?
So obviously there's a lot of agricultural companies, ag tech in rural America, but we decided to focus on a very broad range of businesses, specialty manufacturing, distribution and logistics, yes, some natural resources and products, energy and environment, but also business services and technology enabled companies, and also healthcare product and services. So really broad in terms, not dissimilar from the country as a whole, but within those big sectors, we like certain themes. So one of those is aquaculture. Another is reverse logistics, which is a high velocity business. We also like technical textiles, animal health products. So these rural broadband, also a very big problem. We have about 23 million people in America today who still do not have broadband, and that's a problem we're working on solving as well.
So quite a variety, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's very diverse.
Okay. You also invest in other parts of the country. So particularly, can you talk about the South and the Midwest and how these regions compare? And what do you see taking hold in the investment ecosystem?
So just a very similar distribution of companies with a little bit more weighted into agriculture in the Midwest. You wouldn't be surprised by that, or infrastructure, and maybe more emphasis on manufacturing as well. In the South, still a lot around textiles, you'd be surprised, and some interesting fundamentals around that, but software too. A lot in the South, we've got a lot of software interest and healthcare. So some of that is from Tennessee into Alabama, maybe some of those states that have had a historical attractiveness for healthcare services. The one trend I would say is that we are really looking for and are finding all over the place opportunities around being catalytic. So we are trying to be the first olive out of the jar. That once we step up and say, yes, we'll put in $2 to $5 million, $6 million of capital, then others begin to step forward. It's a confidence issue. So whether they're angel investors or other funds or families, when they see an institutional equity investor come in, they're more likely to step up. And so we find ourselves being a catalytic capital provider.
Interesting.
Across the board.
Okay. Looking at the country as a whole, Can you give us your take on opportunities away from the coastal cities in specific industries? And we could start with, say, food and beverage.
So, right, there's a lot going on in artisan foods, farm to table. I mean, setting aside the whole large Beyond Meat or Impossible Burger type things, these are huge. But we're finding niche, goat cheese manufacturers who are growing at 23% a year and are selling into urban markets. So the connectivity between rural and urban is very palpable in that sector. We like some interesting frozen food confections, but aquaculture can be land-based too and lake-based, so it's not just coastal. And that's beverage is tricky. It's a little bit more nichier for us, but I think the whole health food movement and the farm to table movement is emblematic there as well.
Okay. And what about healthcare? Obviously, that's an enormous industry, very complex. What are opportunities there that you see?
So we try to stay away from services that are dependent on reimbursement issues and regulatory concerns for some reasons that are obvious, require some specialization, and we're more generalists. We're focused on all kinds of companies. So we are looking at products, healthcare products, and some software companies. We are, as women, my partner's also a woman, so we have been able to source and are getting ready to close on a women's health product company, which has great data analytics attached to it because of the demographic, both the fact that women are responsible for close to 80% of all consumer purchases in the country, and the fact that this particular age demographic is also overlapping makes this a great investment. So.
Okay. Interesting. So with sizable deal activity across states and industries, what do you think will be the major fundraising trends for the remainder of this year into 2020 and maybe even beyond that?
So I'd like to say it would be lots of people wanting to invest in rural businesses and that we were the leading edge. But I think our microscopic world is kind of not reflective of the total fundraising environment. Our LPs are coming from banks who are looking to provide also the debt capital to the companies that we find and invest in. There are meaningful foundations and endowments who are interested in impact rural investing and trying to be the impetus for growth in these underserved areas. So I'd like to say that would be a trend, and from our lens, it does seem like there is a lot of interest, but I can't say for certainty that it'll become so large that we'll be talking about it in the coming year or two. So.
Well, thank you very much for the insight. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. It's been a joy.